about is the emerging issues that technology presents in all aspects of criminal law. Definitions of crime, how you commit crimes, how police solve, investigate, and prosecute crimes. And one of the things that is sort of notorious about technology is that the earliest adopters of any type of new tech tends to be two groups, and I can see my students are like, we know exactly what that is, and they are pornographers and bad guys. Pornographers were the first ones to figure out how to monetize the internet and turn profit, and continue to turn profits in spite of the fact that the existence of free pornography is rampant on the internet. They continue to make money hand over fist. Law enforcement, on the other hand, is constantly playing catch up when it comes to the use of technology. And so they are always running behind those groups that they are trying to catch, and then ultimately for law enforcement prosecutors to bring charges. The other part of it is that law enforcement also then learns to use technology to accomplish its own goals, which creates its own problems. You may have followed some of the developments in terms of scientific evidence. It's something that is scientific evidence and valid today is then determined to be junk science tomorrow. And oftentimes law enforcement is caught behind the eight ball on those because they were the big proponents of that type of new technology. So what we're going to be talking about today, or this afternoon, is this interrelationship between AI technology, criminal law, especially in the area of white-collar crime, and how that impacts issues of compliance and business ethics. So we have three panelists. We're going to follow the same general format, where each panelist will have a period of time to do their presentation. We have three going, and then once they are done, we will then turn it over for Q&A. All right. So I'm going to turn it over first to Andrea to talk about investing in artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, we are going to talk about AI and investing, how they work together. And I've entitled this The Good, the Bad, and the Downright Disturbing. Let's see. All right. I might skip through or at least tick quickly through some of these slides because we've covered some of this material over the course of the day. But does anyone recognize this fellow here, any of the AI experts? He's one of the co-founders of artificial intelligence, a gentleman named John McCarthy. And the way that he defined artificial intelligence is doing things, a computer doing things that when done by a human is said to involve intelligence. For a lot of us, and myself included, really did not pay close attention to artificial intelligence. It's not new, it's been around for a long time, as we've talked about today. But people did start paying attention when this company called OpenAI released for beta testing, public beta testing, something called ChatGPT in late 2022. And we've talked about this, a couple of people have talked about the size of the data that this particular application has been trained on. But you can see over time, it's just geometric or, amount of growth in terms of the amount of data that this particular app has been training on. And it's certainly getting smarter. Maybe some would say not, maybe more predictive, able to predict correlations better over time. So, just going from chat 3.5 to 4, we're in a law school, so the uniform bar exam, chat 3 scored in the bottom, I think 5 or 10%. Chat 4 scored in the top 95%. So just very quickly, processing data and be able, and getting smarter and smarter as we go. So I think it really was ChatGPT that got governments around the world to start paying attention to artificial intelligence a little bit more closely. We had our former President Biden issue an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of AI in October of 2023. And that executive order, we had the president talking about the promise and the peril of artificial intelligence, recognizing that it has great potential to do a lot of wonderful things for the economy and for business, but in the wrong hands, as we've discussed, it also has the potential for great peril. At the beginning of this year, we have a new administration and a new approach, I think, to technology in general. And so President Trump rescinded the Biden order and issued a new executive order on removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence. And his goal under this administration is really focused more on the promise of this technology, wanting to sustain and enhance the US's domination as a global leader in artificial intelligence. So is that a good thing? The AI arms race, is it a bad thing? We've heard lots of good viewpoints, I think, today that could lead you to believe it's a little bit of probably both, but I'll start to keep it positive on some of the good things. So there's no doubt that AI is improving business productivity and enhancing consumer experiences in the investing world. That's really what I'm going to talk about, its application in the investment industry, as it is pretty much everywhere else. According to a 2023 MIT survey, over half of the CIOs in the financial services industry were using AI to enhance the company operations back in 2023. I'm sure that percentage is much higher today in 2025. But it is interesting to note that the financial services industry was second only to IT in adopted use of artificial intelligence. So how is it being used in the securities industry? Every which way I think you can possibly imagine. I pulled together the kinds of things that I see when I think about artificial intelligence. It's being used to create new products, enhance products like robo-advisors, which we talked about earlier in the day. But it's used a lot for compliance and surveillance, not only on the industry side, but also on the regulatory side. So lots of different uses for the securities industry. We've not yet seen, as we've discussed, a fully autonomous AI investing platform, at least not yet. A lot of you would say we hope we never do. But I suspect there are people that are working on that today as we sit here. And so I came across some research from an MIT finance professor named Andrew Lowe, and he has been testing ChatGPT and other LLMs to see how good they are at providing financial advice. He says that ChatGPT-4 tested fairly well. I'm not exactly sure what that means by his standards, but that the other LLMs he tested did not. Just really depends on the data that it's been trained on. So one of the interesting things that his team is doing, which I think would be a beneficial use, a good way for our industry to use AI, is he's using something called retrieval augmented generation. I'm not a tech person. I see some people now nodding, so they know what that is. RAG, R-A-G. He's using RAG. And what he's doing is pulling in data from financial lawsuits to see if they can train their AI to default toward more ethical behavior and away from unethical and abusive behaviors that results in settlement awards and orders. So I think that's pretty cool. Federal financial regulators like FINRA and the SEC have been monitoring AI use for a couple of years now. They're, I think, way ahead of us at the state level, but we do watch what they do. And they want to see how that tech is being used to support compliance and fraud surveillance. I'm not endorsing this product, but I was at an SEC advisory committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they did a demonstration of this application called Transparently AI. Has anyone heard about it? So what it's supposed to do, and again, I'm not endorsing this product or any products, I'm just demoing to show you kind of what's out there, is that it is used to review financial statements, which are very complicated, lengthy things for a lot of people to take a look at and review and assess. And it can review financial statements that are thousands of pages of long in seconds, right? And then it can assign a risk score, and it claims it can detect financial discrepancies years before an adverse market event would take place. So they looked at financial statements for things like Enron and other major accounting fraud cases, and looked at the historical accounting and financial statements, and they said, and applying this software and this technology to those financial statements, said that they could detect discrepancies years before those adverse market events happened. If that's true, and I haven't tested it, haven't used the product, that's a really wonderful use case. Companies, corporate boards could use that to detect weaknesses in their accounting systems before it becomes a problem for them. And then regulators like me could be using it to detect financial fraud. So those are some of the good things about AI. things, we shouldn't lose sight of the good things there, but there are also some bad things, some downsides that we should consider as well. So the first thing to remember about artificial intelligence is kind of what I view as the golden rule, right? So garbage in, garbage out, right? So AI spits out what it has learned based on the information that it has been trained on. We talked about that a lot today. So if you think about AI, and if it's been trained on, let's say, the investment advice and practices of Warren Buffett over the course of the last 50 years, you're going to get results that are going to be very different than if the AI is trained on the investing advice and practices of Kim Kardashian, right? So junk in, junk out. The quality of the advice or the quality of the information that you are getting is very much going to depend on the quality of the data and the inputs. Talked about bias. I won't talk about it a lot here, but one of the things that's important to understand, and I talk to my kids about this who are in college, who think, chat and other things are just amazing, is that, bias exists everywhere, even in open source data libraries, even in market data providers, even social, not surprisingly social media channels, but data aggregators. Reddit skews male and young. Wikipedia skews, really male. And so you need to understand your data to understand what biases may be in there. So the SEC has been, up in the last couple of years, I think, looking pretty closely at artificial intelligence and looking at data privacy concerns. We talked about that a little bit today, and obviously, when we click through those terms of service like we do all the time, we're often giving up our data privacy rights, and it's being sold and it's being used, and not always to obviously our advantage. And so the SEC has a concern about how that might play out in the financial services industry. They have also taken a look at conflicts of interest, right? Making sure that financial services companies are not using AI to advance its own bottom line and revenue to the advantage or disadvantage of its customers, or to nudge investors into riskier, unhealthy behaviors. A few years ago, the SEC created what they call an ethical AI framework for investment advisors. They released that back in 2023, looking at equity testing and governance to make sure that the investment advisors, who are fiduciaries, as we learned during the robo-advisor session earlier today, are using AI in an ethical way, not using it to put their interests ahead of their customers, that they do have proper governance, the right people to keep track of what they're doing, to properly manage risk. But what I really want to talk about today is the downright disturbing uses of AI in the investing industry. And I know that the title of the session talks about, white collar crime, but there's nothing really white collar about the crime that I'm seeing in the investing world. What we are seeing is really just international crime lords, thugs that are running scamming operations overseas, and they're stealing, as we learned today, billions of dollars, literally tens of billions of dollars every year from American investors. So last year, Americans lost $4.6 billion in investment scams. We heard $10 billion probably earlier today. Half of that was in investing scams. All right, this is the costliest form of scams in the United States, according to the FBI. One of the most popular investing schemes or scams is called pig butchering. If you don't know what that is, I encourage you to do a little bit of research and learn about that, because it's running rampant. And it relies a lot on artificial intelligence to lure in and trick victims. 1 in 3 U.S. adults have experienced at least one financial scam in the past 12 months, and it's what we're calling a scam-demic. Some of you in the audience are in my generation or older, and you may remember the old commercials. Is it real or is it memorized, right? And when it happened, when we had audio cassettes, we were so excited. We couldn't believe, that we could record ourselves and, trick each other. It's really, really, amazing technology in the 70s and 80s, right? Well, obviously with artificial intelligence, Memorex is nothing. We now have clone voices, voice clones that are way better than technology. Scammers can take videos that are posted on social media, these reels, these TikToks our kids like to use, and they create audio files and can fake those voices, right? And so they've used this technology to do something or conduct something known as the grandparent scam. I don't know if any of you have heard that, but they'll pull down a video of a person's child or their grandchild. They'll be able to mimic their voice pretty convincingly. And then they'll call the grandparent and say, you know, I've been arrested, or I need money, and grandparent believes it, or I need gift cards. And, you know, you might not think that that would be effective, but believe you me, it is. Millions of dollars are lost in grandparent scams every year by using this artificial intelligence called voice cloning. So a few years ago, the regulators who were getting a lot of reports of these complaints and scams said, don't trust anybody on the phone. You know, if you're gonna, you know, someone's asking you for money, you need to FaceTime them. You need to have video calls with them so you can see, you know, their faces and know who they're talking to. See if we can run this clip. I'll see if I.
Hi, I'm Jiro Kim, founder and CEO of Glass Designers, the team behind the Legacy. With Legacy, you can swap your space in real time, right from your browser, no GPU needed. Just upload your persona to the cloud, click on it, and your new node appears instantly. You can test it with anywhere on Zoom, Twitch, YouTube Live, or wherever you need to be. Here are just a few ways you can do it. You VTuber with a custom avatar. Signature in a bloody view. 3D different looks with a plastic surgery simulation. It's simple, fast, and works wherever you do. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing how you use the Legacy.
That's the real guy. So, you know, it's, I don't know, Jake, it's probably not, you know, it's probably be called low grade AI face swapping, but it's pretty compelling, right? So our advice from last year, as recently as last year, you know, during Valentine's Day, we would do an investor alert saying, beware of romance scams. And last year we said, do video calls, you know, don't trust people unless you can see them. This year we had to scrap that. You don't know. It's very, you know, these face swapping technologies make it look like you are talking to someone. They can steal. Deepfake technology, we're in a boatload of trouble, people. So I don't have a lot of time to talk, you know, through the different technologies, but there's a lot of things out there. But because AI has become so good and it's so cheap, I think, you know, Jake was saying it's like under $20 a month. A lot of these tools you can get for under $50. There's zero barrier to entry essentially to using these AI tools that are out there. They become so cheap, so good, and you know, so successful that transnational crime organizations are now using them and moving to scamming rather because it's more lucrative than drug trafficking. And you know, we're going to talk a little bit about that here because I didn't really realize this until last year and have been digging into it a little more closely. But you know, these scams are not just one-off. An individual scammer across these are real criminal syndicates, and they are creating scam cities and scam compounds. If you've not heard about this or are interested in learning more, I'll give you some resources that you can check out. One is, I don't know if anybody has seen this, but The Economist runs a podcast called Scam Inc. Does anybody see or listen to that? It'll totally blow your mind. So The Economist, this podcast is, it follows a local investigative journalist named Sue Lin Wong. And so she focuses a lot of her attention on scam towns in Asia. And so the crime bosses in those towns lure in workers with promises of good paying jobs. They'll post job posts for in Africa and in Europe, you know, promising a pretty good hourly rate or 6-month contract, you know, for a pretty good salary. The people come in and then they're kidnapped. They're forced into labor into these scam cities and these scam compounds to run these scams primarily against American investors. So not only are the victims here in the United States losing their investment money, but the people who are often conducting these scams overseas are human trafficking victims as well. Really a very bad situation. So here you have a picture, satellite images of one of the more notorious scam compounds in Asia, with a place known as KK Park. And in the podcast series from The Economist, the journalist goes and interviews people that are running the scams in the park. And she also interviews victims of people in the United States and in Canada that have been victimized by this particular scam compound. The pictures that show you what the area looked like in 2020 and then what it looked like just last year. And so this scam compound has dorms, restaurants, shops, cinemas, karaoke, entertainment venues, everything that a crime boss would need to run their scam operation. That's not just, one little building in a city. All of the buildings that you see are part of that scam compound. Just last month, Thai police rescued 7,000 people from locked compounds just like this in Myanmar. The U.S. Institute of Peace estimates there are 300,000 other people that are working in these compounds that have not been rescued. Asia is not the only place where these scam compounds exist. Another good resource and very interesting to watch is a National Geographic Nat Geo document series called Trafficked. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it features the work of another investigative journalist named Mariana Van Zeller, and she basically does the same work looking at scam compounds in Africa. So she interviews the people who run what they call hustle kingdoms. And so she interviews the scam bosses and the hustlers in Ghana, and also interviews the victims who've lost money to these scam victims. But unlike the communities in Asia, the hustlers in Ghana don't have to kidnap their victims. They have created an economy of scamming. For many people in those communities, it's the only way to make money, especially good money. But they don't have to kidnap people or lure people in. It is just the way to make money. And so it has gotten to the point that children and young adults go to scam schools to learn how to use AI technology that we've seen demoed today, and to learn the scripts that they do when they are talking with victims. Disturbing stuff. Sorry to be a bummer today on Friday afternoon, but it's important that you all know that and that you share this with your loved ones because, it really is dangerous. It's really hard to protect yourself when the fraudsters are that sophisticated and the technology is that convincing. So we really do need as many people to step up and be what we're calling the AI fraud fighters. And so we'll talk a little bit about the people who do that work. Not surprisingly, we have state and federal law enforcement who are doing the best that they can. But this is an overwhelming situation. I will tell you that AI-related frauds, traditionally they involve cryptocurrencies because that is the easiest way. As currency of choice, it's cryptocurrencies. Our docket of complaints in Ohio has tripled in the last couple of years because of these scams. We cannot stay on top of it. And when they call us in the Ohio Division of Securities to help them out, it's because they've called the FBI, they've called the SEC, they've called FINRA, they've called their local law enforcement, and no one answers their calls because there's just so many complaints, just so many victims out there. So it really is kind of all hands on deck. We're all pretty swamped, but we're doing the best that we can. One of the challenges that we have, especially as a state agency, are just jurisdictional, right? I know that if we do have excellent tracing technology in the Division of Securities, we can figure out where the scam is operating, but if it's operating in Cambodia, not much I can do about it. I don't have jurisdiction to go after the bad actors in Cambodia, right? Even US law enforcement has some challenges when it comes to, when you have a wave like this, you can't go after every organization. And you need not only, international, cooperation, you need cooperation from the country where these activities are happening. And we don't always get that. So there are other fraud fighters outside of law enforcement that are stepping up to the plate. Another interesting resource or person to check out if you want to learn more about this is a woman named Erin West. She used to be a state prosecutor in California, but she quit her job there because she, like us, were getting so many complaints from victims that didn't, just weren't getting any kind of help, that she decided she was going to fight fraud and fight these scams full time, and she created a nonprofit called Operation Shamrock. And so you can see Erin there in the middle. What she's been doing for the last several months since she created the nonprofit is traveling overseas, recording evidence, and trying to find ways to disrupt these scam operations. And she's really clever. One of the things that she decided she was going to do along with her cohorts as part of the Operation Shamrock team was kind of thinking outside of the box. She's like, they're running AI scams, right? What do you need to do AI scams? Electric? You need internet. So we're not going to try to arrest them for, securities fraud and work out a securities fraud case. We're going to work with the Thai government to shut off the electricity and the internet to that compound. And that's what they did. And for a week, that scam operation was disrupted. But a week later, she saw generators being trucked in and Starlink satellites being trucked in. And so the scam operations continued. Scammers find a way. Erin isn't alone. There's a lot of other law enforcement or former law enforcement people who work in this area. This gentleman named Harry Carpenter, he works for a company called Nova4 that does a lot of cybersecurity training. State of Ohio uses some of their products and their training services. He wrote a book called Fake, which is really written to try to educate regular people like us, consumers, on artificial intelligence scams, how to detect them, and how to arm yourself, and tips to try to avoid them. Then there are the most clever fraud fighters of all, in my opinion. These are people who use AI to scam the scammers. In the UK, telecoms company O2 teamed up with a scam baiter named Jen Browning to design an AI chatbot called Daisy. Daisy's info was then intentionally leaked on the dark web because they knew that the scammers would pick that up, they'd buy it, and try to scam Daisy. And within a few months, she scammed nearly 1,000 scammers out of hundreds of hours of scam time. So we'll learn a little bit more about Daisy. Could you run this one for me?
Seven in 10 Brits have been targeted by scammers. And it's not just our grandparents. I was one of them. But this film isn't about getting scammed. This is about getting even. Meet my friend, Daisy.
Hello, scammers. I'm your worst nightmare. I'm an AI created by O2 to waste phone scammers' time. So, W then a dot.
Three times W and then dot.
I'm just trying to have a little chat. Gosh, how time flies. It's showing me a picture of my cat, Fluffy.
It's showing you a picture of your cat, Fluffy.
Stop calling me stupid. Got it, dear. Well, they're busy talking to me. They can't be scamming you. And let's face it, dear, I've got all the time in the world.
So whilst you're out enjoying life, Daisy and O2 are here fighting scammers, taking calls and wasting hundreds and hundreds of hours of scammers' time. If you want to help Daisy and O2 ruin a scammer today, you can report scam numbers to 7726. Because you can't do it all on your own, can you, Daisy?
Who says I am, Rob? Three scammers.
I'm running out of time. What I would say is there are other excellent scam the scammers kind of applications out there. In Australia, they have something called a potty, which is named for the Greek goddess of deception and manipulation. That's a phone scammer or scam the scammer application. And then there's this guy named Kit Boga. He was, I think, one of the first influencers out there to really popularize this and use AI to do it. He's now created a bot army that will, again, just like Daisy, waste hours and hours of scammers' time, and he's able to get information, wallets, IP addresses that he gives to law enforcement so they can shut down the sites and try to recover some money. Just in summary, there's a lot of great things about AI, but in the financial services industry, we're dealing with people's life savings. We obviously do have concerns. We need regulation, like Jake said, to make sure people do not lose their retirements. Get some of this AI crime under control. The biggest thing is there in red. We just really have to do something to combat AI scams. We cannot afford to lose tens of dollars. It's a dynastic shift of wealth from the U.S. to bad actors overseas that they will just invest in other ways to scam and steal from our economy.
All right, now we'll turn it over for an inside view from UTech and maybe how the case protect itself and how our students should protect themselves. Miro, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, I'm Miro Humer. Thanks for having me. I spent my whole life in technology, so I don't speak attorney, so I have to excuse me for that. I wanted to talk about the higher ed industry because it's very different and a bit more complex than some others. When we look at AI in our environment, we have three distinct groups. We have the academics, which is roughly the classroom, what goes on in the classroom with faculty and students, with you out there. How is it used by researchers in their research endeavors? Are they using AI? How are they going to use it? And then how are we using it for administrative efficiency? So that's across all the offices of the university. It could be financial, it could be HR, it could be technology. How are we going to use it and how do we prepare for that? So as we look across our industry, and really all industries, a key to doing it effectively and doing it safely is to having a governance structure. To decide what tools are you going to use, how are you going to use them, and what's the appropriate use for those tools. So as we look out on our current environment, we currently have an environment called ai.case.edu. Have any of you ever heard of that? So that's an environment that we provide to you. It has, it's a safe environment. It has 1,800 different AI models out there. And we're rolling them out slowly as we figure out how they're going to be used. The question is, what's appropriate use of these things? One possible tool is using it as a tutor bot. So you as a student, your faculty member could create a tutor bot with the tools that we currently have that points to their materials, creates a tutor bot that you can use. Sound great? It can have all their slides, their videos, their documents, and you can query them. You can query all of them. You can create study guides based on those materials. Sounds like a great idea. One of the first issues we came across was intellectual property. What if you take a notebook or a published work and put it into the tutor bot? A year ago, that wasn't a problem. Publishers didn't have that language in their laws and their licensing agreements. Now they do. Now they all say you cannot expose any of our materials to any kind of a bot. So we're looking at a governance structure. We'll look at that. what's an appropriate use of the technology that's out there? Can we use it this way? Can we get guidance? Can we put guardrails around how it's used by these different groups within the university? So what's appropriate for faculty? What's appropriate for students? So far, the approach with student use of AI in the classroom has been left up to the faculty member. What they determine is appropriate, and they have to expressly state yes or no. Is it appropriate use in the classroom? How can it be used? So all of those discussions come out of a governance structure. We've put one in, we're refining it, trying to get the balance between a bureaucratic process and an efficient process that gets us to some kind of an ROI on AI without opening up the floodgates to this damaging use of it. Interestingly, when ChatGPT was introduced, about 7 minutes after that, I had faculty calling me and saying, we have to block this. We can't allow this. And they weren't kidding. They were serious. And we said, well, that horse is out of the barn. That same faculty 6 months later said, I want all the AI. I want all of it. So it was a very quick transition from we can't have it, can't use it, to this can really be useful. But still, we have to have some guidelines around it on the ethical use of it across campus, and what liability do we accept based on the use of it, and where are we going to implement AI? There's been a couple possibilities that we've looked at on how it can be used. Is it appropriate to use it for admissions decisions? If we have applicant data coming in, should AI be used for admissions decisions? Can it predict success? So if we look at all our historical data that we have, use that to predict what applicants will be successful in the future, we're going to have some implicit bias in that. It's historically less diverse than it is today. So all that kind of guidance, we have to look at very seriously. How can we work bias out of a situation, out of a use of AI? Can we effectively get rid of the bias? What's ethical? Where is there a liability? Where does it make sense? Where doesn't it make sense? We also look at transparency. Do you want to know if faculty are using AI in evaluating your exams, in evaluating your assignments? Does that make sense? You want to know. Does it matter to you? Should faculty know if you're using it? What do you think? Okay. Should you know if faculty are using it? If your grade comes from an AI-generated evaluation of your assignments, yeah, makes sense, right? So that whole transparency agreement, how do we communicate that? How do we maintain that? How do we move forward with that and make it ethical? There's an ethical element to how we use this. We also have a strong concern around data security, especially in the realm of research or original works. If you go to a free AI tool and you put out, let's say, something original that you wrote, and you say, edit this for me, edit this for clarity, you've effectively published that work. Not in its original form, but the content of it is there. The message of it is out there. So we spend a lot of time creating a secure environment where the data is not used for training of any models. The 1,800 models that are available today, none of them use the data that you input for training. That's critical when it comes to security. And it's critical for any original works. If you're working on publishing something, you want to make sure you do not use a free version of an AI tool. We do not track how you use these models. We do not save the data, but you can create your own prompt library. You can use it to do whatever type of work you need to do on original published works, on intellectual property, specific intellectual property, or data, research data that is part of your published work. So what site should you go to? ai.case.edu. If you have a case ID, it's free to you. And you can go there and use all the models that are available. DeepSeek is also out there. But it is secure. It's in our secure environment. One thing that DeepSeek gives you is it walks you through its process of evaluating or coming up with your answer. It looks like reasoning. It tastes like reasoning. We all know it's not. But it does give you some insight in how it came up with the answer that it's given you. So sometimes you can ask it what's 2 + 2. It'll give you a 4-paragraph answer on how it came up with that answer. So just make sure you go to that site. Well, we also think about what is the workforce impact of AI? The impact to the people that work here, the impact to faculty, the impact to everybody that comes in contact with it. What kind of job displacement are we going to see? We're currently using it in our development environments. We have developers that are using it currently to develop code, to debug code, to do all sorts of work around code. So what does that look like in the future? From an ethical standpoint, how do we want to accommodate that new environment with our employees? What are we going to do for them? How are we going to treat them going forward? What does that mean for them? What does it mean for their autonomy? So I'm sure you've heard the saying that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody that knows AI is going to take your job. So as somebody is using AI more and more, are they becoming less autonomous? Are they becoming more of a requester as opposed to a thinker? What does that do to the work environment? What does that do to their feeling of autonomy in the workplace? Those are all considerations we have around the impact of AI in our world. Also, kind of an ethical workforce concern that we've seen quite a bit is what is the energy consumption of AI? So if you do an AI query, it uses 17 times more energy than a Google query. What are the ethics around that? We've gotten that question quite a bit from more people than I would have thought. We get it from students, we get it from faculty, we get it from our staff. What does that mean for our social concern, our concerns around global warming and the use of energy? So that's been a major concern, say 6 months ago. Over the last 2 to 3 months, less of an issue because of the new models that are more efficient, DeepSeek being one. If you believe everything, all the information around it takes much less energy and much quicker to train, much less data. The push of AI chips to the endpoint devices, they're more efficient, they're quicker, they're cheaper to maintain. All those things are affecting the use of energy and kind of the ethical concern around it. How much should we be concerned about that? What are we, as we're transitioning to more and more use of AI, is that appropriate in the broad use of it? And then we come to crime. For us, that's mostly cybercrime. What we've seen is not any new crimes. What we've seen is a lot more and a lot more creative cybersecurity. So all the things they were doing in the past, they are doing now. They're just doing it much faster, much more creatively, and much fewer spelling errors. So the volume is been incredible. We see it coming in. I think last month we had 93 million phishing attempts come through. Yeah. And they're more targeted to specific people, much more targeted than they were in the past. They're targeted on business processes. It's scary how how quickly they ramped it up. We're in the mode now where we're looking at using AI to combat AI phishing attempts. Gotten so bad that legitimate communications people will not respond to. It's difficult to do business today. If you send an email to anybody with a link in it, more than likely they're going to call me and say this is legit. We cannot send an email with a link in it. People won't respond to it. The tools we have to catch phishing attempts, catching legitimate emails, because they're getting so close and so difficult to differentiate them. And we see that as just accelerating quite a bit. The creativity of them is really impressive, and how they're geared towards individuals. They have your family's names, they have your addresses, and they can key the message to you specifically. And we're seeing that quite a bit. So that is a significant challenge for us. We've seen it attacking our business process, our business offices. And it's scary. It's really scary because it is accelerating so quickly, and they're not even getting to the next phase of it, where they're using AI to be much more creative in what they do. This is still the same old stuff, it's just better. But what's the next step going to look like? So that's really, if you have, I'd like to answer any questions you have, but just know that we are really looking out for you as students, as faculty, as staff on campus, and it's a constant challenge. Anything you can do to help would be awesome. But any questions you have for us and what this looks like in higher ed, be happy to answer.
I have a question for Andrea too, but just for you, any thoughts about whether you plan to put a Claude agent in AI.case?
A Claude is on the docket. Yeah, Anthropic is on the docket. There's also, within the next few months, we'll have an integration directly into Canvas through that tool as well.
Or you ask me a question, can I ask the students a question? Do you use case.ai or do you use?
I didn't hear
it.
You do not trust him.
I will use it now.
So we'll hold the questions until we finish with our third speaker. I do, however, want to recommend students use the UTech site. It is an incredible resource, not just for AI, which is ai.case.edu, but UTech site has all kinds of incredible sources for you on training, access to different types of programming, education, things like that. It is a great resource. And then for those of who are my students who are worried about me grading with AI, I use the old analog method. I stand at the top of the steps and throw it down. So, all right. So now I'd like to turn things over to our third speaker, Professor J.S. Nelson. I believe is joining us via Zoom. I saw her for a second. Yep, there she is. All right. Professor Nelson, take it away.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. And you may hear my dog too. He has been fed. He's convinced he hasn't, but he has been fed. So I'm delighted to talk to you guys today about a vein of research that we've been doing. So I am law and management, so I crossed over to business schools a lot, but my specialty, I always have to say what it is, not how to do it, is white collar crime. So we have actually been watching, and we can induce this in the lab, and we can see this in field work. This phenomenon where if you over surveil workers, you actually induce increased levels of what we call workplace deviance, but it is also white collar crime. And also you reduce levels of moral agency, which is essentially what you need to get whistleblowers and for people to resist orders to commit white collar crime. That is really, really significant because the numbers are shocking. So the surveillance systems, and this links to AI because your surveillance systems of 10 years ago are not the surveillance systems of today because they are integrated with AI. And we'll talk about how AI changes the surveillance systems. But the very short version of this is everything that is part of the trigger in over surveillance for triggering misconduct by organizations gets worse with AI. So we've studied and we are continuing to study what exactly the point is between surveillance, which is your basic level of surveillance, which to give you a whole lot of academic research in a nutshell, if you are just watching, for example, the alcohol in a bar and have a camera on the alcohol, people understand that. They understand that you are literally just watching the assets of the business. You can have a camera at the point of sale system, your cash register or something else like that. Employees don't have a problem with that. I'll use the word workers rather than employees because we're also talking about the gig economy. It has a lot of and temporary employment and all kinds of different relationships, right? Anytime you have somebody supervising someone else, right? We can talk about workers and managers. The same phenomenon happens. So anytime the level of surveillance that seems to work to prevent, say, petty theft, right, is to, say, have a camera on the alcohol or have a camera on the point of sale system. Now, most accounting professors will tell you, our accounting systems are good enough at this point and cheap enough at this point for almost every business to use, that it's very, very difficult for there to actually be petty theft and embezzlement, miscounting change and things like that. Even if you have a cash business, we have pretty good systems that you could put in place that are focused on the cash register, right? The difference that flips into over surveillance is when you say, start moving the cameras, not just from the alcohol, but say to the bathroom, or because the employees could be taking, or the workers could be taking the alcohol from the bar area to the bathroom. You start surveilling the bathroom, and then you start surveilling the parking lot because they can bring them to their cars, and then you start surveilling this and that and that. It becomes the following of the worker, him or herself, and that is perceived directly by workers as intrusive, invasive. It breaks the trust between them and the person they work for, the entity that they work for, and you start getting highly transactional behavior and misconduct. You get misconduct on both sides. You get misconduct from workers who say, essentially, well, if you don't trust me, then we are not in this together, and I will, take every moment to sabotage surveillance systems, which is a completely understandable reaction. And also, you see massive declines in productivity, you see massive declines in innovation, you see massive declines in profitability for companies. This is the worker who will no longer give you their brilliant idea that they have in the shower. Instead, they're going to leave and spin off their own company with their own work, and now you have a trade secrets lawsuit, right? Like that's what that does. And on the side of the manager, what we see really fueling a lot of this behavior where they're watching the workers so directly and they think of themselves as, needing to put cameras in bathrooms and needing to put cameras in all kinds of, the parking lot or whatever it is. We see them escalating control mechanisms. So it becomes an issue of personal control. So as you can imagine, this got out of control during COVID when a lot of managers who had personal control concerns had their workforce essentially for the vast majority of people who were capable of working from home, most of them were now working from home during COVID. So we saw an enormous spike in the sale of worker surveillance systems. And now these worker surveillance systems were doing exactly the type of surveillance that was the most problematic. It was the one at home through the laptop, which was in someone's kitchen, but also in their bedroom with their significant other and their children and everything else. And we were getting, this type of surveillance where the microphone was always on, the camera was always on, the personal cell phone becomes then a surveillance device. You will notice that even if you turn off a cell phone, the surveillance systems still work. You have to literally remove the battery. And in most modern cell phones, you cannot do that anymore. It is following people everywhere. And that is exactly what we are seeing is triggering over surveillance, right? That starts to break down the relationship on both sides. So we are also seeing, unsurprisingly, higher levels of misconduct, both directed within organizations. So a lot of the way that this white collar crime, these patterns tend to manifest is that they're actually management pushing, very tired, often overworked, junior people to coordinate in things that end up being misconduct. That's the Wells Fargo example. That's the, many other examples have that very specific pattern to them. And the surveillance systems, in this case, in the Wells Fargo's case, it was literally the compliance systems that were used to manipulate employees and workers that way, to push them into committing misconduct. And then the second pieces of that is, of course, we have workers who are being manipulated through those surveillance systems and are less able to marshal ethical resources. This is the moral agency problem. When you are surveilled in this way, you have you have moral disengagement, and we are finding that phenomenon says, screw you, I'm not going to report to hotlines, I'm not going to do anything about it, I'm going to do what I can to get out and leave because I don't trust this relationship with this company. And you see, the whistleblowing systems also start disintegrating. So you have more misconduct being driven by the managers and the organization itself and the top of the organization, and you have less resistance at the same time because of how these surveillance systems work and how intrusive they are from the workforce, which is a real problem because if you work in this area, you realize that you need whistleblowers. A lot of people have very mixed feelings about whistleblowers. Whistleblowers, if you run compliance systems, are your canary in the coal mine. You absolutely need whistleblowers. You need ethical conduct. And it is only 3% of fraud internally that is actually ever flagged first by a surveillance system or a compliance system. The vast majority is human whistleblowers. And we'll talk about why the surveillance systems are so bad at actually finding fraud. They're really not designed, and AI is making it worse because they're worse. And the design of how AI works in a surveillance system also makes it less and less well suited as a fundamental structural matter of computing and programming alignment to deal with this kind of human behavior. It's sort of a perfect mismatch, hitting exactly the wrong points in surveillance. So I have a ton of slides and a ton of data and a ton of other things to show you. I think one thing to make you aware of, and this may be of interest to the group here, especially the students, is it's often the junior most employees who are surveilled in the most invasive ways and feel this the most acutely. So sort of the tip of the spear is your investment bankers and your people in finance. I will also point out, because I say this with respect because I know we have a regulator on the panel, it's the regulators too who are pushing this type of surveillance because the companies want to be able to say that they are in control of their workforce and that they are watching what they're supposed to be doing, but they're actually using the surveillance to push misconduct. And that is pretty well documented at this point with as many surveillance systems and results as we have. And I have a whole piece on the details of the SEC's rules and exactly how they push this over surveillance and how they push effectively the results on misconduct. And that's a whole other conversation, but literally our conversation here is on AI. So I will go a little bit into how the AI systems that are now hooked to the surveillance systems are so insidious and so bad in this context. So let me go ahead and share. Can you guys see that slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. So, all right. This is part of a project that has spun out of a book, and there's been a ton of research, and we have a lot of data and surveillance now. But these are some sort of basic takeaways on sort of AI in the surveillance. So this issue of over surveilled workers is an enormous one, and I specifically think about financial regulation and what's happening in the financial industry, because it is kind of the tip of the spear. It's one of the most over surveilled areas that we have, and that is largely due to the regulation. But it also has to do with some cultural issues and what it means to work in some of these areas. I want to point out, though, that we have this idea from Peter Drucker, who's the famous the father of modern management. And he was talking about knowledge workers. He was talking about people who are the ones paid for what they think. And so we see this very much in law firms too. And so those of you who are going to be junior associates in law firms, this is your world too, or in most other organizations. So we are at the roughly the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT. Law, though, I pulled these stats for the lawyers in the room. Law is adopting AI at a particularly fast pace. I want to see that nearly, so these are 2024 numbers. We're now 2025, and this moves so fast. These are probably, they need to be revised quickly. You can assume it's only going up. So nearly 80% of firms use AI, up from 20% the year before, and they're using it in their surveillance systems largely, but also in their research systems, which are watching employees as they research. And the real problem is also pressure on business models. So this is from Clio, 74%. Oops, I don't know why that jumped. Okay. Just to let you know sort of how fast law itself has changed, and I'm not going to be able to go through all of these, but essentially 74% of billable hour tasks could be automated with AI, because what is AI is usually large language models. What are lawyers in law firms? We are professional large language models. We gather a whole lot of information, find the patterns, and bring them back, right? So law is particularly vulnerable to AI in the product delivery and generation side of it. We are seeing less penetration on the investment banking and the financial regulation side, because AI is still not that good at math, but it's still being used in surveillance systems. So this will definitely affect billing by the hour, especially for lawyers, right? And the technology is being used to study people to replicate their jobs and replace them. So firms stand to lose $27,000 per year per lawyer just in previously billable work, just from the advances in the last year. So we can expect that to accelerate. And it cuts into the way that lawyers generate and manipulate ideas. So it really is literally coming for you guys who are most junior lawyers first, but also if a partner interacts with an AI model that is also studying how the partner does things, then they could be, if it's an open model, they could be training their competition. So that's something that partners should be worried about. They don't necessarily think about it that way, but they should be worried. And this is becoming an issue now, that you could be seeing more fraud, just because more stuff is delegated to AI, so it could be sloppier, but also just because the law firms are under financial pressure if they weren't already being put under financial pressure by other factors, which I will leave to your imagination. Anyway, I thought this was a little ironic. This is the marketing for AI as generated by AI, of course. But I want to think about AI in surveillance systems. So you already have sort of a pressure on the business model, pressure on junior associates, pressure on everybody, right? But the way that AI works in this sense is not a few cameras at a construction site, right? In order for AI to work, you need so much more training data than even the machine learning algorithms of even a few years ago. So just to get a sense of this, like you now need millions of data points from AI for AI to give satisfactory results, especially on something complicated like human behavior. And so the level of how you are being surveilled, the number of things that are being recorded about you at all times just has to increase. And people are under this surveillance now 24 hours, 7 days a week at home, through their computers, through their cell phones, through the other devices, in order to just be able to have AI models have something to run on, right? This is a function of the computing power. I would also say we're supposed to enjoy this, right? This is generated by AI. And then I want to just close maybe with the last couple of points of just about how different AI is in surveillance systems than previous models. First of all, AI is particularly bad at understanding the meaning of human behavior. It is fundamentally not human. It mimics humans. It is sycophantic. It wants to please humans. But it's not good at reading human behavior. It's actually a huge flaw and weakness. What it is doing is taking huge data sets and replicating the patterns and highlighting the patterns that it sees in those data sets. I want to just emphasize, though, for you that as a statistical matter, when you have large data sets and you have outlier cases like, say, white collar crime, statistically, when you replicate that, not only do you have something what's called model collapse in AI, which is that the AI is reading more AI is reading more AI and becoming less and less human and understandable, right? And able to predict things, but it literally reduces the probabilities of the outlier. So it's actually spectacularly bad at catching outlier cases. It just starts to, if you think about a bell curve, it compresses the bell curve so that you have only the norm of behavior. So it's actually very blind to human behavior, and especially outlier human behavior like white collar crime. So literally the firms have no way to understand what's happening inside the system, right? There's no transparency, so it's hard to actually be able to correct the data sets that the AI is learning from. And then I would also say this is a very important point for all of you going into these surveillance systems. The AI is spectacularly good at de-anonymizing data. It's like amazing at de-anonymizing data. So there's no such thing as anonymizing surveillance data anymore, or healthcare data, or any of it. It's just I'll just give you an example. So it's really, even back in 2015, we could anonymize credit card reports for 1.1 million people on the basis of 4 data points. And if you're talking millions and millions and millions of data points per person, like it's ridiculous to talk about data being anonymous in any way now with the AI systems. And then finally, this has been highlighted by some other speakers, but just the enormous power consumption this takes, that this is not a particularly efficient way of surveilling people, understanding human behavior, governing human behavior, right? If you are firing on the basis of AI algorithms, you are, perpetuating discrimination, you're doing all kinds of things, but also you're just not understanding human behavior. And then also you are way over consuming on resources because you are using, let's just put it this way. Even GPT-4 consumes 100 to generate 100, using that to generate 100 words consumes 3 bottles of water. By 2030, we think that 17% of the entire US energy output is just going to go to data centers powering AI systems to do what? Something that they're not really well suited for. So this was I asked AI to generate something about excitement. This is AI's understanding of excitement. To most humans, that would look like terror. But there you go. And then finally, I would just say something about AI companies. Most of this AI data is being run back to the companies, and they actually have the information to flag employee or worker conduct, not the companies themselves. So it's actually very interesting to see some really strange examples of the things that they've flagged and what they've done and things that they've missed. So all of that is being collected by, OpenAI, Google Chat, all these other companies now, and you are becoming those millions of data points on you are becoming part of what they own, not necessarily even what your employer knows about. Although, of course, they can sell it back to your employer and to anyone else because we don't have data protection rules. I'd also say, if you have to think about who's running these systems and why they're running them and what direction the AI companies are being given as they run these surveillance systems. And Jeff Bezos is famous for saying he wants to remind his employees to be afraid and to wake up every morning terrified. And this is part of his plan to do so. I also say Elon Musk has said that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, and what he's trying to do with his 5 bullet points for Doge and federal workers, but he did the same thing at Twitter and elsewhere, is to try to terrify people and to control their behavior. So these surveillance systems especially when juiced with AI, it's improperly juiced with AI, are part of that system. So I will stop there because it's the end of my time, but I'm happy to take questions. And there's a lot of research in this area about how humans respond, which is a whole other conversation because you know, the AI systems are not necessarily well deployed in this area, but they are now constantly permeating. I'd say, you should just assume that AI is being used. The Smoke Chamber of Commerce in 2024 said even near 98% of even small businesses are using AI, and this is mostly in their surveillance and workflow processes systems. So that's what I had. I have a lot more slides, but I'll stop there. Take questions.
All right. We have a few minutes to take questions before the closing address. I just want to point out to the students, one of the things some of you may be exposed to is Henrietta Lacks, who is the mother of the DNA technology and stuff. Here's the scary part about AI. You're all Henrietta Lacks. And you have no control over your data. Take my criminal class and we'll terrify again. So at that point, let's turn it over for questions, and somebody's going to run the microphones around.
So I have a question for JS and a question for Andrea. I'll start with Andrea because you went first. You talked about the scam the scammers approach, which there is a certain poetic humor to it. But to the extent that scamming is, I think, pretty clearly a volume business that's also driving human trafficking, do we think that scam the scammers actually makes a difference?
I don't know that it's putting a dent in it. I mean, obviously, the bot army, Kit Boga's bot army, but even he can't run it full scale because of the energy situation. I mean, he will explain that. So you are investing a lot of energy to scam scammers, and you may not be making a dent. But hundreds of hours spent wasted on a scam bot is hundreds of hours it's not spent separating our older generation from losing their retirements. And so right now we're losing this battle. I mean, law enforcement, nonprofits, scam baiters, all of we're losing this battle. So everybody who can contribute. And again, they're also developing technologies to help, multiply and leverage these resources to combat it. So, yeah.
So the question for JS is, so I'm a surveillance phobe, and so this is particularly powerful to me. And also, I'm not surprised at all that over surveillance has perverse effects. But I have what may be a very naive question about surveillance in law practice. I left law practice long enough ago that the only form of surveillance that I was subject to was not particularly technologically driven, right? Like I had to enter my time because everybody has to enter their time. And that is a surveillance technique of sorts, but it's also how you get paid. And of course, then there's your standard kind of performance review stuff, which is a level of surveillance that virtually every worker is subject to in every industry. How is surveillance being technologized in law practice today beyond those things?
Well, so actually, this has been really interesting. There's been a whole series of revelations that actually contract attorneys are where a lot of the surveillance systems have been trained. So if you are a contract attorney now, say asked to do document review or something, first of all, a lot of the document review is now electronic, but and automated by AI, of course. But if you are asked to do document review, it's your face that you are on a camera, right, through your laptop. Your face is being read. It's being read not to just identify you, but to identify your micro emotions. So, this is let me give you some examples. So, you are being, your irises are being scanned. So there's a lot of biometric data. The micro motions on your face, which is mostly concentrated up here in your eyebrow area, but also in down here, are being read to train the programs on your emotional state, so that if you are you could become a disgruntled employee, you could be hiding evidence if you are reading it by being surprised about something. But also, this is being used actually over Zoom as well, so that if there's an announcement over Zoom, the AI is reading the micro emotions of the 700, 900 people that's being read out to see whether you are possibly unhappy in some way with how your work orders are being given. It also, by the way, reads sexuality. So this is a huge issue in the LGBTQ community. Um, and let me give you some other data just on this. So this has been a particularly humiliating experience for workers of color or workers of different cultures, where the expressions may not be standardized. You could actually be fired for having a quote unquote bad attitude about your work, even if you are maybe, particularly expressionless during your work. So it's supposed to check your engagement, but engagement has emotion sensing to it too. Your microphone is also on, so they can listen to not only what's happening where you are sitting and anything that you say, but anything that your family or anyone else says around you. So if someone were to mention pregnancy or prostate cancer, you could be fired and never know why, which has been happening quite a bit. So also just to sort of give you some other sort of across the boards data on this. So obviously 62%, these are 2003 numbers, so they're very old. In this world, they're old, right? You can just multiply them and assume that they're much higher. 62% of businesses remotely monitor, obviously, web browser and application use, 48% block programs. 40, almost 45%, 44.7% track workers' attention through biometrics. This is watching workers' eyes and facial expressions that I just described. 43.2% captures workers' faces and bodies through random screenshots through the computer. And those can also be not just used for the computer training, but actually posted on live feeds. And sent to your boss, so that if you were to pick your nose at some point or sneeze or give them the finger, you could be fired on that basis, obviously. So 37.4% log or record workers' keystrokes. So if you are working at home and you have to check your bank account, your employer now knows what your bank account is. 37.4% workers actually require workers. So it's almost 40% require workers to actually live stream video of themselves from their home, their space, to the company and to others now. And that live streaming is actually being watched. We know that 93% of businesses confirm that the live stream of their workers is monitored. Over 80% report that the person or people watching the feeds does so over 8 hours a day. And another 6% of businesses watch live feeds of workers more than 8 hours a day. So you could be randomly have your computer or your cell phone turned on at any hour of the day or night and be watched to find out what you're doing and with whom, which is obviously a concern if you are, say, LGBTQ or anything else. You have anybody living with you for any reason. So this is like this vast sort of scoping of information. It's not just sort of you're logging your timesheets. It's literally you as a person are being watched and your emotions are being read. And then we're also training the AI to duplicate you. So if you get watched if you are a less than successful worker, right? And I've been interviewed plenty of times about mouse jigglers and different ways of trying to sabotage AI systems. It doesn't work. So you could be watched if you are a problematic worker, but you could also be watched and being replicated if you are a good worker, because the AI could be trying to emulate you, duplicate you. And the question becomes then, are they duplicating your expressions and your emotions and your whole way of being as well. And there's a question there of, what you own and what you don't own. And right now, our law default is that your employer actually owns all that, not you. Who you are and how you express yourself.
All right, so we have to move on now to closing remarks, right? Jenna will get very mad at me if I don't stay on schedule. I don't like students who are mad at me. So, Jenna, I don't know if you're gonna introduce closing remarks or? Okay.
Thanks to the panel for a wonderful.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you all so much for coming today. A lot of hard work went into today and it went really, really well. And we appreciate all of you who flew in and prepared for today and gave incredible presentations. And for myself, I learned so much today. I'm sure everyone in this room can say the same. So thank you again for everything. And a special thank you to Professor Chafee for making today happen.